The method is very simple. In one sense, it's extremely simple. So let me talk about that, and people can just follow this prescription and actually get started meditating in 2 minutes now. Not have success within 2 minutes, but the basic method itself is not hard to understand. So let me describe it. You adopt a sitting posture, and this can be done in an ordinary kitchen chair or any chair at all. One that allows you to sit up reasonably straight is normally the recommendation. So your bottom is on the seat of the chair and your back is not supported by the chair. And in the beginning, and when I say in the beginning, I mean in the first 20, 30 seconds, simply move your hips around forward and backwards and maybe left to right, and then lift your chest a little bit and bring the chin back in so that the head and neck move further over the center of your balance and so on. And just have a feel of your body in that position. That is the first instruction. And now what's interesting to me, having listened to many, many people grapple with these instructions, is, and this is why I spent 35 years of my life developing the stretching system that we have now, is because many modern people, the first instruction to feel your body literally does not connect. They can hear the words, feel my body. They understand the meaning of the individual components of that sentence, but they don't actually feel their own bodies.
It's amazing
so that's fascinating
that is actually a continuum, that you go from, that you're right, that before starting any of this kind of work that I'd done with you, all of my practice had been very much neck up. And the sensations that I felt, I thought, well, that's the maximum level of granularity that I can feel. But looking back, it was really just gross sensations, like really blunt stuff. And actually, you can go deeper and deeper. And obviously doing a 10-day Vipassana retreat where you're fully focused on the little atomic movements within your body, you realize there's so much richness in what you can feel.
Well, there's a universe inside you. Simple as that. Anyway, so that's the first thing. You're sitting on a chair and you're feeling your body. And let's say in the beginning those feelings are not clear. And we'll come back to that, because for most meditators, and your experience on that 10-day retreat, you may have some comments on this, most meditators' overwhelming experience on their first retreat is pain somewhere in the body,
Yeah.
Is that connecting?
Oh my God.
Okay, we'll come back to that. We'll come back to that, and the reason we'll come back to that, and please remind me about that, because whilst physical pain is a common experience on a retreat, it is completely unnecessary. And as you know, that was my entry into teaching meditation in Buddhist monasteries in Asia, was taking that set of teachings to the home of Buddhism, and having and working with students, sometimes long-term meditators who've been meditating for as long as I have, but to bring that physical component so much more explicitly into the meditation practice completely transformed their own practice, because what it does, and you've already commented on this, it brings you out of your head, which is where thinking happens for most people, and into your body. Now, two things happen here, but we'll come back to that, because I'd like to just briefly encapsulate the method. Otherwise, I'll end up talking for an hour and still people will be at the feeling the body stage. So you're sitting on a chair, so we're still 10 seconds into your first experience of starting to learn how to meditate. You're sitting in a chair. You can perhaps feel your bottom bones against the hard wood of the chair if you're sitting on a wooden chair. And then we posit what's called the meditation object. Now, as you noted in your own podcast on meditation, the standard recommendation for the meditation object is, well, it's normally described as the breath. And also, too, there are some terrible instructions given about watching the breath. Don't watch the breath. I'm going to say that is a serious misdirection, and yet it's the very first experience or the very first instruction that many people have in their practice, and it's one of the reasons why the practice doesn't bear the fruit that it can. The instruction that I much prefer is feel the movements in your body we call breathing. Breathing is a word, it's a concept. It's not breathing itself. And just like in that old Zen parable about the finger pointing at the moon, we want the experience. And if you want the experience of something, I should say, meditation is an embodied practice. Now everyone says that, but what does that actually mean? It means that the body that you're in right now, sitting on that chair, feeling your bottom bones, that is the body that we will meditate with. No one else's, none others, not at any different point in time or space. This one sitting on the chair right now. My body, your body. So some people recommend closing your eyes or softening your gaze if that connects with you, but all these practices can be done with eyes wide open too if you want. It's just that for most people, because the visual cortex is their main mode of stimulation these days, it's probably helpful to reduce the stimulation on the visual cortex, and the easiest way to do that is just to lower your gaze to a meter or two in front of you and then let it softly go out of focus. But we'll come back to that because you can do it with eyes closed as well. Okay, so as you sit there feeling your bottom bones on the seat, you become aware, or you will become aware if you direct yourself to the movements that we call breathing, you'll become aware that in fact your body while sitting on this chair is anything but still. It's actually moving subtly all the time. And we can put some labels on some of these movements that might be helpful. For example, when you breathe in, feel what happens in the body when you breathe in, or find the movements in the body that we would label breathing in. Now, we don't prescribe these things because some people, for example, would much prefer the sensation of the breath at the nostrils, so we might describe that as a kind of one-pointed concentration, or it might be that the person who's trying these instructions for the first time is actually aware of the space of the whole room that they're in. One is not better than the other. The question to be answered at all instants in your practice is, what is happening now? It is so much more subtle and it's so much simpler than everyone will tell you. But what you'll observe as soon as you identify either the nostrils in the narrower focus or your tummy, which is my preference. Most people can feel their tummy. I'm using tummy in the non-anatomical sense of just feeling the body from the ribs down to the hips, let's say. That part of the body there, we might, if we're going to be technical, we might say your abdomen. Feel what happens in your abdomen as you breathe. This is fascinating, and so let's say as you breathe in, you feel something. I don't want to preempt what you might feel, but as the breath goes out, it's a different something. It's a related something, but it's a different something. And as you say, it's rich. It's rich. And not only is it rich, there is no limit to how deeply you can go into it. But here is what happens. If you're sitting there doing the feeling as I suggest, at some point in your practice, we might be 30 seconds into the first minute, or we might be a minute in, a thought will come into your mind. You will notice that a thought has come into your mind. And that is your first act of meditating. Meditating is about noticing what's happening. And so, as I speak about in this little introduction to meditation, I've heard many, many people say, well, I had a really bad meditation practice today, and the teacher will say, what do you mean a bad meditation practice? What happened? And the person will say, well, I noticed that I was being constantly distracted. And if you're working with a good teacher, they should say something like, well, actually that is meditation. Noticing that you're being distracted, and yet when you become aware that your awareness has followed a thought, noticing that your awareness is no longer in the movements in your body, because remember, that's the primary meditation object, and your task as far as you can is to hold your awareness, and this critical next word, hold your awareness gently on your meditation object. because it's possible, and I've seen this happen a million times, the people with strong concentration and usually with good intellect as well, they will screw themselves down and literally force themselves to follow those sensations. So that's just being harsh on yourself, and believe me, that's a dead end too. But we'll discuss that later perhaps. So my suggestion is, when you notice that your awareness has moved from the sensations in your body, which we are setting ourselves up somewhat artificially, I agree, as our primary object, when you notice that your attention has moved towards the thought stream and you're starting to engage in what it is that you're thinking about, and then you remember, oh, that's right, I'm meditating. I'm supposed to be aware of what's happening in my body in terms of the movements. Then don't be harsh on yourself. Just smile to yourself. I always just laugh and just say, there's that mind again, doing the thing that it does well, which is to distract us all the time. Now, in the beginning, you may find that it's very difficult to do that, but please don't say to yourself, and so many people do this, oh, I can't meditate, I'm just too distracted all the time. No. What the practice is simply this. As you notice more often that you're being distracted by your thoughts, you smile to yourself and you gently bring your awareness back to whatever your meditation object is, and you gently stay with that and stay with that until something else happens. That's all. And what's happening in the process of you noticing that your awareness has been drawn away by your thoughts and then gently bringing your awareness back to your meditation object, you are strengthening your capacity to concentrate. This is a profound gift to give yourself. Now, I'm not talking about strengthening your capacity to concentrate so you can be more productive or any of those other instrumental things that people so often talk about in relation to this. No, I'm talking about being more aware of the processes inside you that are even more you than your mind. That's what I'm talking about. And it does have all sorts of benefits, and we might talk about those later if we ever talk about, for example, well, I'll mention it now. Everyone in their life has some aspect of themselves which they experience as sticky. And by that I mean, let me talk from personal experience. That'll make the point clearly and simply, I hope. But for many, many years, the big problem that I had personally was irritation/anger, always lurking. So when things were not satisfactory, and I use that word deliberately because I remember talking to a student once, and I used the Pali word dukkha, which is normally translated into English as suffering. And this guy said to me, he looked at me scornfully, he said, there's no suffering in my life. I'm just looking at his face and I'm seeing the face of suffering. And so I reframed what I said. I said, okay, no suffering. But what about unsatisfactoriness? And he just cracked up. He said, there's plenty of that. So look, this is the trap of words. We do not want to get trapped in some kind of conceptual understanding of this practice. No, it is a direct, embodied, physical practice. And look, I'll add one thing and then please ask me some specific questions. What the beginning meditator does not know yet, because they have no experience of it, except perhaps for acts of contemplation which have manifested by themselves at some stage in your life where you were sitting watching nature or watching the moon come up or something, whatever it is, and you realize that you're actually lost in the direct experience of that thing. And people will label such experiences as mystical or ecstatic experiences. In fact, those experiences, that wonderment, are available to you all the time, but in order to access them, you have to, and listen to these next words because they're critical, and this is partly my contribution to this art. When we directed your attention to the sensations in the body that we call breathing, and this is not an obvious thing, but when you actually experience sensations in the body, you are present, meaning you're not in your thought stream. And the thought stream, I should add this detail as well, and people will probably find this very objectionable, but thoughts, in the thought stream sense, thoughts are never experienced in the present. They are always thoughts about the future, a future which may or may not come, or they're thoughts about a past, even if we're talking about the past of only a second or two ago. The thoughts do not occupy the present moment, and for many people that is it's a truly shocking thing to contemplate for a moment. Well, what do you mean? And then someone's mind will always go along this path. Well, does that mean when I become a good meditator I'm going to lose the capacity to use my mind constructively or productively? Or will my learning, the 6 years I've just spent at med school, that suddenly vanish if I become a meditator? No, of course not. What will be taken away from your mind, though, is its obsessiveness. Now, when I say obsessiveness, what do I mean? Well, who listening to this conversation has not had the experience of waking up at 3 o'clock in the morning, thinking about something, and not being able to put that thing down? Well, the answer is everyone, right?
Yeah.
If someone has not had that
Absolutely.
experience, I want to talk to them, because maybe they're like Padmasambhava and they came into this world fully enlightened, floating down the Ganges River on a lotus blossom. That's possible, but I've not met anyone like that in my own life. The people that I regard as having transformed themselves, and that's as far as I go. I won't talk about enlightenment because I think that's a totally fanciful thing to even consider as a person who's contemplating, will I begin to meditate or not? The most important thing by far in the meditation instruction is to do it. That's the first thing. And secondly, to really pay attention to what's actually happening, not what you think is happening. And the way to do this most honestly with yourself is to attend to your physical sensations, because I'm going to make another big claim here. And the claim is, your body has only one language, and that is the language of sensation. And most sensations in the beginning are experienced on a 3-axis, or not a 3-axis, that's incorrect, on a continuum where you have unpleasant sensations at one end, you have pleasant sensations at the other end, and somewhere in the middle here are sensations that are neither pleasant nor unpleasant. In the beginning, your capacity to distinguish between these things is limited, and that's because we in our culture are simply not trained to either to attend to our sensations, except when they are painful and they're bothering us or they're disturbing us in some way. But in fact, what most people don't realize is that your body is talking to you all the time, and its language is sensation. Now, why should we care about this? I mean, I have met plenty of people who regard their body as fundamentally an impediment to doing what it is they want to do. I can't stay awake for long enough, or blah, blah, blah. I will argue that the only things that are really important to you in your own life are the things that the body experiences. And let me just describe what I mean by that. The experience of sexual pleasure, for example, or the experience of eating good food, or the experience of holding someone who you love and who loves you.
This is something you mentioned in the last episode, where you said that it is only the body that can experience the present. And you said just before that thought is always a marker of time. It's always the symbol of something slightly in the future or the past, even if we're thinking the thought at the time. And I think it's a bit of a weird claim to make until you experience, and I think the only time I truly felt that at a real intuitive level was the 10-day retreat, when I felt that every thought has a physical counterpart and vice versa. And it's almost as if the thought that is associated with any sensation is like the timestamp. It's the
It is.
marker in time
That
of
is
that
precisely
physical
that's precisely what it is.
sensation.
Yes.
So that that method that you've really clearly described there, hopefully anyone listening who is procrastinating about meditation and what style to do, or has heard some of these previous recommendations of people saying watch the breath or whatever, and not really got it. Hopefully that's enough to stimulate them to do it. And most people listening to this will have been lifting weights for at least some time, and so it's going to seem, if someone came up to you and said, oh, I'm thinking of starting to lift weights, but I don't know whether to do daily undulating periodization or linear progression or 5-3-1. You'd be like, well, look, man, just go in the gym and just do something, just do 5x5. And they'd be like, oh, but is it really optimal? You'd be like, it doesn't matter. Just get in and do something.